we need more guidance from the federal government and more resources in that upstream. Like, how do we respond to the crisis that's in front of us? Because it is a crisis. And I'd love to see more, I think, again, federal guidance about, what it means when we force people who are homeless to move from place to place and lose their belongings and lose their security and lose their relationships and lose the communities that they've built. Like it by default puts homeless people into a place of being criminalized in a way that costs all of our systems more money and decreases the safety of the surrounding communities and puts local cities at odds with each other when you're pushing people from one, oh, that's the state land. Oh, push you over to the side of that fence. Now you're on the city land. Oh, we're going to move you over here. Now you're on the county land. Oh, now you're on the state parks land. Oh, now you're on the BLM land. We don't have the housing needed to move people into housing. And we're doing everything we can to make that happen. But figuring out how we deal with humane, at some point, we're going to have a conversation about what sanctioned encampments look like so that people have a place to exist and sleep and be safe. And I would love to get more guidance, I think, from ICH about what that looks like. Because we can talk all we want about, the guidelines and the best practices, but the reality is we don't have beds. We have a family shelter here in Seaside with a waiting list of 200 people on it. We have the shelter in Salinas that we, worked really hard to get up and running, and it's got a waiting list. We have a safe parking program that feels like it's this force of nature to keep everyone on board and supportive of it. It's one of the cheapest, most effective programs that we have, but we've got a waiting list there. We don't have more places to send people, and in the absence of the best practice of have the housing available for folks, we need more guidance from the federal government and more resources in that upstream. Like, how do we respond to the crisis that's in front of us? Because it is a crisis. I'm firmly committed to, making sure that Monterey County, to the degree that we can, that we're going to continue to treat our unhoused residents with respect, with compassion, and that we're not going to create more trauma by simply allowing the bulldozing of where people are currently trying to, survive and create this adversarial dynamic with our neighboring jurisdictions. So I think we're going to have to figure out, and I'm looking at you, Supervisor Alejo, and the coalition to figure out, like, how can we have this conversation and be really clear about our values and how we treat our neighbors, recognizing that we do not have the housing stock that's necessary or the shelter beds that are necessary to simply move people and displace them. You said it. You said how homelessness is a policy choice, and there are so many policies that feel like they're unmovable and unshakable and unshiftable, but we're allowing those policies to continue to exist if we don't talk about them. I am really concerned, I have to say, about the Grants Pass decision and what it means for the work that we've done and how we've been able to move forward. I think that prior to the overturning of Grants Pass, I think that was probably one of the biggest reasons that we were able to get local jurisdictions to engage as, part of the solution. It was necessary. It allowed us to gain the political will that was necessary to get local jurisdictions to bring housing shelters, housing solutions, housing services, homeless services into their communities. Because you had this weight of, if you want to address the encampment, you have to provide the alternative option. And it sort of forced everyone into saying, okay, we do want to provide services and housing in our community. I worry that we've lost that trigger that has allowed us to make the progress that we have. And I'm hoping that there is more that the federal government can do to reinstate that kind of pressure on local jurisdictions. So that's an ask that I would have of you. So the coalition is going to engage in that work about how regionally we what our sort of approach would be. And clearly it's voluntary for our cities, but I think that having clear local guidance to say, hey, we're 12 cities and a county in a fairly small area. So anything, and with the state and with other partners, right? So anything that one community is doing is going to directly impact the neighboring community, the neighboring jurisdiction. So for us to be clear about, what our our values are and what our sort of guiding principles would be, I think is important. And I guess I'm just trying to understand, is that something that we need to engage in conversation with our staff and come up with some recommendations, maybe to bring to the coalition for conversation, or is the coalition going to be the point, the agency where that work gets initiated? In the way that we have built some, I think, really and restored some trust and built some collaborative coalitions where there is sort of common agreement, I think it's important that given the grants pass ruling, that we have that conversation about how we collectively intend, are there a set of values that everyone would agree on? We have the 5-year plan to end homelessness, and we have cities that have all signed on to that. So in the spirit of collaboration, in the spirit of making sure that we are, as much as possible, all sort of lining up in the same direction, I think my concern is, that we find ourselves in a situation where very quickly a lot of the trust building that's happened, that was in some ways sort of everyone's hand was forced because of the grants pass initial ruling. We're now back in a situation where we could very quickly find ourselves with one community doing cleanups without the commitment to provide housing for those residents, and moving people between communities. And that's what I'm saying. I'm just looking for where. And if the coalition is not prepared to, or you're not prepared to bring this to the coalition to have that conversation, then I think this is a conversation that we, as the homelessness committee of the county, need to draft out. What are some of the guidelines, and then shop those around to say, is there agreement? Where would we find agreement with our 12 counties around how we move forward with encampment resolutions, given the overturning of grants pass? So for anyone who's interested in engaging in the conversation, it sounds like the conversation will be moving to the COC around trying to build out or think about what some regional agreements might look like. I appreciate that, having the money definitely brought people to the table, but I can also see in the conversations I've had that, it wasn't just the money, because there have been times where we've had resources available and people still said no to welcoming services and housing for our homeless residents into their community. So I think it's maybe multi-pronged, multi-factored, and I just want to make sure that we're being proactive in how we think about it and how we talk about it, and how we continue to work, how we recommit to continuing to work collaboratively between our local jurisdictions. There is trust, but sometimes it's tenuous, and all it takes is one encampment cleanup where people are moved from one city to the next city to undo some of the hard work that's been done over the years.
One of my strategies is definitely about education, which is why we brought UCSF or the usage here today to kind of kick that off. I do have many conversations with local jurisdictions and also jurisdictions outside of Monterey County, just trying to keep my finger on the pulse of how other communities are responding. To that end, I held a meeting with Alameda County, LA, Sacramento, and there's like 6 counties, maybe more, in the meeting that I had last week, and we're really starting to dig into what would our policies look like. I do plan on bringing a draft to this body, hopefully at the next meeting, for input from our committee members, and then also just hoping to be the model for our partner our city jurisdictions, and really exploring what does it take for us to build the collaboration, not just internally within our own departments, but also with external partners like the Housing Authority and the Continuum of Care, all of the other very important entities that are working on addressing homelessness. And hopefully, our local cities can reach out. Well, they always can reach out to me if they have any questions once we roll out our policies.
What you've put out and what you just reviewed with us today is significantly improved over previous guidance that was available. And, we've put in some of the programs that we do, some of our most effective programs right now for service providers, specifically around safe parking programs. That was actually discouraged. And some of the things that you're now recommending were things that were discouraged in previous guidance from ICH. So I just want to say thank you for hearing and seeing and understanding the nuances of what we're trying to achieve and how to get there. The need to incentivize existing housing stock to be used as homes is something that, we're talking about in these sort of one-offs here and there. But really it's our tax structure and our tax system that allows for, housing to be used as investments, and prioritizes that over having housing be used for homes. And like, that's a conversation we're going to have at some point. We have 11,000 vacant homes in Monterey County. Like, we could solve our homelessness crisis here if we could, and I know it's not as simple as what I just laid out, but like, that's the reality, right? In Tuolumne County, they have 25% of their housing is second or vacant homes. That would more than address the issues that we're addressing. Given everything that Monterey County has been through, the stark reality that has become very clear and apparent to me, and we're talking about power and power structures and power dynamics, but the way that FEMA doesn't provide support or isn't set up to provide support to individuals who are most likely of being hurt by climate disasters. If you don't have a home that you lost, FEMA isn't there to help you. If you don't have a rental agreement because you were living in a unpermitted structure, you're more likely to be impacted by climate disasters than someone who owns a home. But FEMA's there immediately when we had 4 multi-million-dollar homes that were at risk. But we had to fight really hard to get FEMA to even show up or listen to us when we had hundreds of people who were displaced. But because they didn't have a value of the property that was lost, like, somehow this all has to shift. And so I guess I'm telling you things you probably already know, but I'm also asking you, help us understand how we can be better advocates to voice these issues in the right venues.
No, thank you. You mentioned quite a few, like you said, things I already know, but it's always good hearing it from elected leaders like yourself and from local government in particular. And the federal government still has its work to do too. We are by no means perfect. There's a lot of things, FEMA being one of them, in terms of climate change and disaster preparedness. I think there's at least an effort through the Justice 40 initiative that is every agency, federal agency, has to look at what they do with an equity lens, basically, and looking at the work with and environmental justice is becoming more and more an issue. I've been doing a lot of work with Army Corps of Engineers and FEMA and EPA in areas that, talking to people who all have to deal with the same challenges of people in encampments in infrastructure areas that's not only dangerous to the people involved, but also dangerous to undermining the infrastructure in the whole community. And so how does that all interconnect together? Are conversations that are currently happening, and you bring up some great points there. So thank you.